If you have ADHD, you've probably noticed that you have this uncanny ability to accurately predict the ending of movies and books like 10 minutes in, even when they have some pretty significant plot twists. We are exceptional at pattern recognition, and we can easily connect seemingly unrelated dots and detect subtleties and nuances that most people would completely overlook. But because our minds are always seeking out these connections and explanations, when we're faced with uncertainty in our lives, it can immediately lead to anxiety and frustration and can manifest as fear or avoidance of situations that do not have clear outcomes or definitive answers. And this really isn't surprising because it has been shown through research that people with ADHD do have much higher levels of something that is referred to as uncertainty intolerance. Now, as I'm sure you know, when we are in these situations, our minds immediately jump to worst case scenarios and start filling in the gaps with all these negative possibilities. And because we also tend to be really creative, there is never a shortage of terrible things that we can imagine happening. We are unfortunately just really great at catastrophizing. So while being wired for finding these connections can be a superpower when it comes to solving problems or understanding complex situations, that same ability also tends to trigger our anxiety response in cases of ambiguity and can lead us to not only worry, but do everything we can to try to avoid or eliminate this uncertainty, often with detrimental consequences. This was my daily experience for most of my life, which was no fun at all, especially since uncertainty itself is an inescapable part of the human experience. So what can we do about this? How can we learn to better tolerate uncertainty so we're not constantly suffering with fear and anxiety? Well, there are several things that I have found that help dramatically. The first is having awareness that this is even happening and also acknowledging the scary stories that we are trying to tell ourselves. So once we start to notice that we're having this anxious response, we want to sit down and actually write out what exactly we are worried is going to be the outcome of this situation, even if it seems ridiculous once we put it on the page. We just want to list out all the different negative possibilities that are swirling around in our head. Then instead of just allowing these stories to just kind of loop around, we are going to challenge them and look at the facts, which can also include our personal truths. So in other words, in a very detached type of way, we just want to consider what we actually know to be true about a situation without allowing ourselves to kind of fill in the gaps from our imagination. So for example, it could be as simple as statements like, my boss asked to speak with me without giving any kind of explanation, and I have no idea what he would want to speak to me about, and now I am feeling anxious. And I know this seems kind of basic, but it can make a world of difference because we need to start to separate reality from our anxious thoughts. And this may be a little bit challenging because we actually get very attached to our imagined stories very, very quickly. Believe it or not, we may almost kind of prefer latching on to the thought of a negative outcome rather than suffer through uncertainty. That is how strongly it can affect us. Now, the next step in the process is to challenge our invented scenarios by looking at these facts and then questioning our story's validity. Now, I want to say right off the bat here that this can be a little bit more challenging for us than other people because we tend to engage in something called emotional reasoning, which simply means that we have the tendency to confuse our feelings for facts. But even though our emotions can be really, really powerful, we do need to understand that they don't always reflect reality. And one of the best techniques I found for challenging these automatic negative thoughts is through the ABC model, which comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. And I have a whole video explaining exactly how to use it. It walks you through everything. So I will go ahead and link that down below because this is something that can change absolutely everything for us. Now, if there are still times that you cannot get your mind off this what if train, try switching the focus to even if. So here we want to switch our attention to all the different ways that we could cope if this terrible thing were to actually come into fruition against all odds. We just want to remind ourselves that no matter what happens, we are still going to be okay. I think this is a really important consideration because even though it's been scientifically proven that the worst case scenario that we imagine does not actually happen 90% of the time, we can still get caught up in worry over that potential 10%. And in those times, we need to begin to recognize our own strength and resources. So going back to the example of our boss wanting to speak with us, let's say we just can't get it out of our mind that we're going to get fired, even though we are great at our job and even though there is zero evidence to support this. Instead of just dwelling on this possibility and just feeling helpless, we can shift our focus to thinking about how we would handle it if we were in that situation. And by refocusing our attention to coping strategies and action plans, we empower ourselves and we are able to really reduce the intensity of our anxiety. Now, something that we can do to help with all of this in the long term is to gradually begin to expose ourselves more to uncertain situations. And yes, that does mean intentionally asking ourselves to do things that would typically evoke feelings of discomfort or unpredictability for us, but it could be as simple as simply taking a different route to work and exposing ourselves to very minor uncertainties that we might encounter that are really not going to overwhelm us. And I know that can sound kind of scary, but it is important that we begin stepping outside of our comfort zone in controlled, manageable ways so that we can learn that doing so does not automatically lead to negative outcomes. In fact, in most cases, it's actually the complete opposite. We end up realizing that we can handle these things with no problem. Remember, the goal isn't to try to eliminate uncertainty altogether. It's not even possible to do that. It's just to start to build up our tolerance to it. Now, I'm not going to lie, it is a process and it does require patience and perseverance, but I can assure you that it can be done. I have worked with many people who have successfully overcome this, including myself, so I know it's possible, and it all starts with awareness. So as always, I truly hope that you found today's video to be helpful and relatable, and I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and link down an entire playlist of ADHD videos that I think you may also find helpful. I want to thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you in the next one.